One has to wonder, in some ways, if the limits to growth collapse has already begun. The picture on the left is post-Katrina New Orleans. The picture on the right is Baghdad. I've heard it said that the future is already here. It just isn't evenly distributed yet. Similarly, the Romans experienced soil depletion in their breadbasket regions of North Africa, and as that happened, they debased their silver currency, so they were experiencing inflation, a very early form, simple form of inflation. They increased taxes, the bureaucracy doubled, they increased the size of the army, and all of these things just made their problems worse. As the level of complexity increased, the benefits from that complexity began to decline. So what do we have to look forward to? Is our society going to collapse over the course of the next century as the limits to growth studies forecast? Or might it be possible for us to gradually and controllably contract our societies so as to create a sustainable situation, a survivable situation for future generations? Well, certainly the latter is possible in theory. There's no question about it. We have all of the knowledge necessary to enable that to happen. We know that certain trends are inevitable at this point. There almost certainly will be less available energy throughout the course of this coming century. Yes, we can produce energy from solar panels, from wind farms, and so on. But to think that we can replace fossil fuels one-to-one with these new energy sources is really wishful thinking. We need to develop renewable energy as much as we can, as fast as we can, but the overwhelming likelihood is that we will have less energy to go around. Therefore, in all of the things that we've mechanized, we're going to have to unmechanize at least some of them. In other words, replace machine labor with human labor. And of course, the major trend of the 20th century was mechanization, along with urbanization, moving people off the countryside into cities. And this happened in most cases as a result of market mechanisms. Of course, in the Soviet Union, it was the process called Stalinization, and it resulted in massive starvation and millions of unnecessary deaths. But the same process happened in other nations. We just called it by different names, industrialization usually. But it resulted in millions of people being forced off their farms because they couldn't compete with the agricultural machinery. Small farmers forced off their farms into the cities, and that process is happening today throughout the less industrialized world. We will need a massive relocation of people. I travel around my country, the United States, and I visit cities like Phoenix, Arizona, or Las Vegas, Nevada, or Los Angeles, California. And I try to envision what these cities will look like in 20 or 50 years with water shortages, with energy shortages, with people unable to operate their air conditioners, with the grocery stores no longer being supplied on a regular basis with food from 1,500 to 3,000 miles away. Those places don't look so good in that context. So where are people going to have to live? They're going to have to live closer to where they can be supported by the local resource base. And how are they going to get there? Somehow we're going to have to devise some system for relocating people in a reasonable, rational, humane way. But if we don't, the result is going to be very, very ugly. We're going to need a massive replacement of infrastructure. Over the course of the last few decades, we've built massive infrastructure that only works with cheap fossil fuels. Just think of the highway systems, not only in my country, but yours as well, and the hundreds of millions of dollars we've spent building highways that make no sense without automobiles. So how are we going to accomplish this enormous reorganization of society without some kind of chaotic breakdown occurring along the way? Well, I can think of three scenarios by which this might happen. The first one isn't a very happy one. I call it feudal fascism. in which a strong central government, controlled probably by military and corporations, especially in my country, would organize all of these changes and think about work camps, total surveillance. That's kind of what this option looks like. And it probably wouldn't be able to survive for long because people don't put up with those sorts of conditions forever. And eventually it would probably devolve into a kind of renewed feudal system of local warlords presiding over regions that they could somehow control and organize. Not a very happy future. Here's scenario 2. I call it the eco-deal after the New Deal of the 1930s, presided over by FDR, Franklin Roosevelt. Susan George, the economist, has called this ecological Keynesianism. And this also is a strong central government approach, but here the government would redistribute wealth, organize the societal energy retrofit, promoting democratic culture as it does so. And the New Deal of the 1930s is really emblematic of this. The government stepped in, reorganized the economy, created work, built post offices and bridges and all sorts of infrastructure that's still being used all across the United States. And it was generally successful. Of course, the Depression didn't fully end until World War II, but nevertheless, it in effect saved capitalism from the results of its own doings. If the eco-deal were unable to survive indefinitely, if the gradual decline in the energy base meant that a large continent-wide nation like the U.S. weren't able to survive as one unit, it would probably break down into sort of a federation of bioregional democracies. That's scenario 2. Scenario 3 is what I call bottoms up. Now, a lot of people don't like big government solutions in any case, and it's very possible that neither of the first 2 scenarios would really be capable of dealing with the enormous range of problems brought on by energy shortages and food shortages, water, and so on. So we might see more of an intermittent and generalized breakdown of society. Sort of imagine 100 Hurricane Katrinas happening all over North America or elsewhere around the world. Local governments and citizen organizations would have to bear the brunt, just as they did in New Orleans, and try to pick up the pieces, build a sustainable society from the grassroots. Now, the problem with the bottoms-up strategy is that the global environmental and geopolitical problems that we face really require large-scale solutions, and citizen organizations and local governments simply wouldn't be up to providing those. So, in fact, we may see all 3 of these strategies implemented in different places and different times. Some countries, I think, are already well along the way to the feudal fascist solution. Others, I think, will probably tend more toward the eco-deal or bottoms-up. But I would have to say, of the biggest and most powerful countries in the world, U.S., China, Russia, authoritarian kinds of solutions are already more or less